I am so grateful to everyone that helped in this. I cannot thank them enough from the bottom of my heart, because my family is here with us safe.
She, one of the thousands of people who are now able to greet their families at airports from coast to coast. Her family originally blocked from entering the country, but due to the legal battle going on as we speak, they are now allowed in, just like scores of others who were caught up in the middle of this. Well, yesterday I spoke to a man who knows about this issue firsthand. He's helped humanize this whole thing for us and many others. Kirk Johnson is the founder of the List Project to Resettle Iraqi Allies. He's also author of To Be a Friend is Fatal, The Fight to Save Iraqi Americans Left Behind. You know, obviously, with people trying to follow all the legal developments as it relates to the ban where we've had to stay and we'll follow through the courts, they'd also heard that there'd been an effort on the part of the Pentagon now, given the backlash, to expedite waivers here for interpreters and others in other Iraqis who had worked to help us. But that's far from settled, as you understand. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. It's become clear that whoever drafted this executive order barely did any consultation with the executive branch agencies that are involved in implementing it. And so the State Department, Homeland Security were barely consulted on this. And so what that meant was that Iraqis who had done everything our country asked of them to apply for these special immigrant visas or through the what are called P2 visas that are designated for them were included in this ban. As a result of the backlash, the White House is sort of scrambling to carve out exemptions, and so some of these interpreters are now being let in. But this is a deeply flawed, confused document that doesn't seem to understand the most basic things about the already extreme vetting system that is in place for refugees that come into our country.
And Kirk, I'm glad you raised that, because I think there's still a lot of misconceptions in the general public as to who these people are. And for a lot of people, you put a face and names to some of these people who literally risked their lives, and some who lost their lives in defense not only of American interests, but also working alongside U.S. military, and you saw this firsthand when you were in Fallujah. So first of all, the process. It's not like all of a sudden somebody decides, hey, I want to go to the States, and they go and they get a plane ticket and they're American citizens. Give an idea and humanize as much as possible the risk these people put themselves in to help us, but also how long and arduous a process it is to actually be able to get a visa to come to the States.
Sure. And this is a really important thing. Your average American doesn't have time in between all of their jobs to try to understand the ins and outs of the refugee screening process. So let me give an example. One of the Iraqis I write about in To Be a Friend is Fatal, in the earliest days of the war, he was approached by U.S. forces. He was fluent in English, and he served as an interpreter going around the neighborhood with the 82nd Airborne, helping them find bombs that were unexploded from shock and awe. In the 90th day of the war, the convoy he was in was hit in a complex attack. That's an IED followed up by small arms fire. One of his friends, an American staff sergeant from Minnesota, was shot in the face. This Iraqi, who we call Homeboy to protect his identity, without thinking about his religion or nationality, he looked over and saw a friend who was wounded and who was in the middle of the field of fire. And Homeboy ran in and tried to drag this guy to safety, an American, and in the process had his own leg shot off. Now, he was thought to be dead, but they heard him groan and they managed to keep him alive. But afterwards, he was let go because he couldn't really interpret for us with only one leg and with all the medical attention he needed. He went into hiding for months, moving from safe house to safe house while militias were trying to find the Iraqi who tried to save the Americans. He eventually fled. The first day that he got a prosthetic limb, he walked to the American embassy in Jordan and said, "My name's Homeboy, this is what I've done for the United States. Can you please give me a visa? I need a new life." He waited 4 years to come here. He submitted all of the appropriate documents. He submitted scans of the government and military badges that he was issued. He gave them the recommendation letters of active duty members of the 82nd Airborne and the 101st Airborne. I mean, this is something we have to be very clear about. These are the most documented refugees on the face of the planet. You don't get to ride along in a Humvee with our forces unless we know who you are. My colleagues had routine polygraph examinations in order to work for us. We know who these people are. And that's why a bipartisan bill was created to give them a pathway to come here. Tens of thousands of visas were set aside for these people because we recognized that we owed them a great debt for all they had done to our country, to help our country. And so for 2 years, they go to interview after interview after interview where where agents from the Department of Homeland Security fly to the region and ask them everything about their political beliefs, their religious background, their extended family members. They verify their service to the United States. And then oftentimes they'll make them wait for a full year where they'll ask the exact same questions. And if a single answer changes, if in year 1 they said they fled Iraq in March and in year 2 they say they fled in April, that's it, they're rejected. Our system to vet these people is so extreme that we take our own employees, the Iraqis who are running themselves from terrorists, and we make them wait for years in order to navigate this gauntlet. And so to hear the president and his advisors spin this fantasy, and in some cases literally a fantasy when we're talking about the Bowling Green massacre, but to scare Americans into thinking that you can just board a plane and fly here and the bad guys are going to rush in if the ban's not put in place, it's nonsense. And it's also incredibly dishonest to the American public. How am I supposed to explain this to Iraqis who were promised something and did everything we asked of them to legally apply for visas that Republicans and Democrats set aside for them, which have now been yanked from their hands? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, again, you never had tweeted before. The ban came down, and you had your own tweet storm, but putting real people's names, real people's lives here and sacrifices to this country. And I think a lot of people got a better understanding from it. And if you want to also understand a little bit what these folks have gone through or went through before this ban even came down, you should check out the book, To Be a Friend is Fatal. Kirk, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And coming up next, chaos in the Trump cabinet. Education Secretary who wants to tear down public education. Labor Secretary picked who hired an undocumented immigrant, and a Health Secretary choice accused of profiting from healthcare stocks his actions could have impacted. Not really anybody's idea of draining the swamp.